Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. I am glad you guys could join me today, and I hope you're all surviving well enough during this Capunka Vibus insanity that we're all going through, all in our isolation and all that kind of stuff. And for those of you wondering, why do I call it Capunka Capunka Vibus, is because YouTube has now gotten itself into the habit of deleting any video that mentions it at all, that is not pre-approved by our authoritarian masters, sort of thing. And there've been quite a few people that I've seen that have had their videos deleted. Now, this isn't about the virus directly, but you'll see exactly what it is that I mean. And so I did this test actually on another video of mine called Viral Stupidity, where they're under in the, so if you bring up the video on YouTube, in the UK there's this intrusive blue bar that's NHS this and this and this, and regardless of how utterly useless the NHS is in general, they expect us to use that particular link in order to further inform ourselves properly about Capunka Vibus. You know, even though they're not they're not following the best advice, and even the most logical advice that should be given, and all that sort of thing. And so as soon as I sort of changed the writing and stuff like that in my video, suddenly that bar no longer appeared and stuff like that. So that's the kind of thing I want to avoid, because as far as I'm concerned, YouTube is not a publisher, and they shouldn't be getting involved in that sort of thing. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, today I want to actually talk about a very, what I believe is a serious issue, especially nowadays, where we find ourselves as I mentioned, in the middle of a pandemic, right? Yet another one, yet another one. The Capunka virus, the coronavirus, right, is now all over the place, and everyone's panicking, everyone's freaking out completely. And once again, where does this virus come from? It comes from an animal, right? First of all, it comes out of China. Yet another one to come out of China, and out of the same type of situation, these meat markets that they have over there, where they basically just there's no hygiene, there's no sense of anything, there's no. And when you look at that, right, and myself as someone who takes the whole idea of health and stewardship, which the vast majority of Christians actually do not, right? Stewardship of the body and stewardship of the earth, right? You don't even hear about stewardship anymore, right? These days, everyone is more interested in philosophical arguments for the existence of God more than anything else. And the actual how to live is, for the most part, is really neglected in the world. So when all of this started to break and stuff like that, I thought my mind immediately went to so for example, I used to date this Jewish girl once upon a time, beautiful, lovely family and all that sort of thing, and they ate kosher, and it got me thinking, you know, and they actually taught me quite a lot about the whole process that you have to go through in order to get certified as kosher. And it's quite a ridiculous process, but how the hygiene standards and the keeping of certain meats apart from each other, and all of these, and no contamination with blood, and it got me thinking, wow, how many animal-borne viruses would we avoid if the whole world practiced kosher? Right, when in their practice of dealing with meat, first of all, getting rid of animals that are considered unclean, and second of all the hygiene practices and things like that go with that. And so we go, and as soon as you think then kosher, your mind is immediately taken back to the Old Testament, right, in Leviticus and so on and so forth, where you have these rules. And a lot of people like to say, no, this was for the Jews. And this is one of those idiot statements that you hear from Christians whenever they're unable to explain the relevance of something, They what they tend to do is just dismiss it and say, well, that's for the Jews and it's no longer applicable today, even though they generally have no idea why the hell that is the case, right? They do the same thing with the Ten Commandments, a lot of people, so that they fall into outright antinomianism and so many things, so that basically Christianity today, at least Western Christianity, is completely unruly. There's no sense of temperance, nothing. It's just a complete and utter mess. Generally speaking, right? Christians in the West are fat, unhealthy, dying of disease and all these kinds of things. And people sort of, oh, why? You know, and well, obviously, right? We have forgotten the fact that God, even though certain ceremonial things are no longer applicable to Christians today, the fact of the matter is that the concept or the principle of stewardship over not only the animals and the environment, but over your body is still applicable. Now, one of the things that brought this to my mind was a video that I saw by a gentleman named John on his channel called Whaddo You Meme. And he was interviewing, and basically it was a very funny video, very good video, where he was talking to William Lane Craig, responding to anti-Christian memes that exist out in the world. And one of William Lane Craig's responses really, really bothered me, okay? Now, I'm not doing this video because I want to go after Whaddo You Meme or because I want to go after William Lane Craig. I'm going to say from the outright, before someone decides to be a smartass, I'm not calling them out or anything like that. In fact, to call out someone like Dr. Craig, you'd have to be either really, really, really sure of yourself or really, really stupid. And you know, to call out someone like William Lane Craig. I mean, he's a thoughtful man, and as far as I'm concerned, regardless of whether I agree 100% with everything he has to say or not, or even John or not, is completely irrelevant. As far as I'm concerned, these two gentlemen do more for the Christian faith than the vast majority of Christians who basically come once a week, sit their backsides down in the church, have their little service and bugger off home, and then do basically sweet nothing in terms of forwarding the gospel message and stuff like that into the world. So these men are to be respected for what they do. They are and so on and so forth. So this is not one of those idiot, I think I'm clever, I think I'm better and stuff like that. But it is to raise an issue that I think is very, very important. And so I'm going to play the clip for you. I'm going to play it in it's just the section in its entirety for you to watch, and I'm going to play it in its entirety so that no one gets the idea that I'm trying to clip or trying to be funny or anything like that. And you can sort of see why or how I'm going to then tie all of this stuff, the virus and all of these kinds of things, into each other. And one of the interesting things for me in my mind is that this video was released on the 5th of March. Which is basically in the middle of our social isolation because of this pandemic, and I find it very strange that no one picked up on this, right? The irony and the opportunity to establish a robust defense of the Christian faith, and that this whole thing actually provides us quite an important opportunity. So let's go and check it out quickly, and then we'll discuss it some more.
Rant against Old Testament regulations about eating pork. And it seems to me...
Whoops, sorry.
All right.
There we go.
You lived a good, compassionate life, but you ate bacon. So the hell that you are going to is that way.
I guess this is a kind of anti-Semitic or maybe anti-Muslim rant against Old Testament regulations about eating pork. And it seems to me that it's entirely within God's prerogative to set up even arbitrary rules for how he wants people to live. If God wanted to prohibit the eating of beans, I can't see that that wouldn't be his prerogative. It would be his right to say, thou shalt not eat beans. And for a time, a temporary time, he gave an order to his people, the Jews, not to eat pork. And it seems to me that was entirely within his prerogative and discretion.
All right, so basically, William Craig's response to it, to the meme, is basically atheists are taking this. So this is profound ignorance on the atheists' part, where they don't seem to understand why the Levitical laws were actually there in the first place. Because basically the secular world, the only thing they're interested in is indulging every appetite on the planet, and that's the appetite for sex, the appetite for food, the appetite for all pleasure whatsoever. And the words stewardship and temperance simply do not exist in the secular vocabulary. It does not exist at all, right? And the world is just new disease after new disease after new disease, obesity pandemics and all of these kinds of things, where the vast majority of diseases that are being treated in hospitals today, right, that are the biggest responsibility for the drain on the financial resources of a country, right, is in fact having to treat diseases that come as the direct result of utter negligence of personal health, right? So William Craig's response is that it's within God's prerogative to make arbitrary rules. Now, logically speaking, this is in fact correct. God being omnipotent and so on and so forth, it is not logically contradictory to say that God, if he wanted to, would be able to make an arbitrary rule. But the problem with this, and this is one of the objections that I've found atheists often raise, is that a lot of the time it seems like apologetics exists purely for the sake of giving an answer, right? And not for really the sake of giving something that is completely and totally coherent with the Bible and everything that's within the Bible. And I have that tendency to agree as well. So, a lot of the time, yes, we should defend the faith, but giving answers just for the sake of giving answers to satisfy some critic is also not satisfactory at all. At least for me, I don't like that at all. Either say I have no idea, right, which is what a lot of people, even these gentlemen, I believe, would say that. But to say, well, God could just arbitrarily do that, it's like the real question is, would God be arbitrary or would he not be arbitrary? And in my personal opinion, no, he would not. God has a very, very specific reason for why he does absolutely every single little thing, and you will see absolutely no evidence from cover to cover of Scripture of God doing anything for arbitrary reasons. Sometimes we do not understand the reasons. Yes, we do not understand the reasons. So, for example, what we know today about health and medicine, the people in those days would have had no idea. They would have simply had to have accepted certain things on faith. But these days, understanding medicine the way we do, we are fully capable of adding to that faith, the knowledge that we've subsequently gained. And this is something that really, really frustrates me with a lot of apologetics today, that it does seem like it is just for the sake of giving an answer for the sake of giving an answer, and it doesn't seem to want to go beyond that. Now, I do appreciate, before again anyone accuses me of being uncharitable, I do realize that it's not within the remit of this Whaddo You Meme's video to really go into any kind of detail and stuff like that. But I do believe a better answer could have been given. Again, specifically, it's a really missed opportunity for Craig to say, well, listen, we are in the middle of a pandemic at the moment, right? That is a direct result of human beings not practicing hygiene with animal products, essentially, and the mixing of clean and unclean meats. So, for example, we understand that the swine, often acts as an intermediary species, so that a virus can jump from another species to the pig, and then from the pig onto humans. This is quite common. And then at the moment, as far as coronavirus is concerned, the suspicions and the research seem to indicate that the virus originated in bats, and in pangolins. And pangolins are considered a delicacy and are often smuggled into China as a delicacy meat, and that there was this cross-contamination. It contaminated human beings, and then it went from there. Now, so let's get into this. Just a few things, right? So the biblical narrative talks about clean and unclean. Now, most people at this point would say, listen, clean and unclean is a concept for the Jewish people that is no longer applicable. This is actually nonsense, right? Because when it comes to foods and animals, the concept of clean and unclean already existed at the time of Noah, long before there was any such thing as a Jewish nation. All right, Noah was told to take a pair of animals onto the ark, with the exception of clean animals. Clean animals, he had to take 7. And the reason for this is because God understood that after the flood, he was going to, because the flood would demolish vegetation, and he understood that, and if you look at flood geology and all that sort of thing of what would have resulted, it would have been quite a while before there was an ability to cultivate and reap the rewards of cultivating your crop foods and all of these kinds of things. It would have been quite some time, and so it was necessary, temporarily permitted for human beings to eat animals and to supplement their diet with animal food, but in a highly restricted way, because God understood that not all animals were fit for. First of all, no animal is fit for consumption. God did not design that we should ever eat animals. First of all, we read about the Garden of Eden. And unless you're one of those people, one of those Christians who doesn't want to take it, who wants to impose evolutionary stupidity upon it, right? Adam and Eve in the garden, there was no meat. It was a vegan diet, basically, at the beginning, and all that sort of thing. So later on, and even in those days, like once Israel was able to establish crops and so on and so forth, right? They still did not have the kind of access to the variety of food that we do today. So, for example, I can walk down to my local Tesco store, and I can get berries from Spain, I can get fruit from Brazil, I can get fruit from South Africa, I can get fruit from all over the place, vegetables from all over. I can get stuff from literally all over the world. These days, we're spoiled for choice, whereas even in those days, once they had established cities and settled and were able to farm crops, the knowledge, etc., was very limited, and so there was still then the need to supplement their diet with animal food, but to a limited extent, obviously, still maintaining the mindset of stewardship, temperance, and all of these kinds of things. Now, here's something that we need to notice, we need to understand, right, is how many diseases, right? Now, diseases that come from animals are called zoonotic. Right, is zoonotic diseases, right? That's the name, that is the term for diseases that exist because of our interaction with animals, because they've crossed the species barrier. And the question is, how many of the diseases that afflict human beings historically and even today are a result of zoonotic diseases? And the answer is, depending who you ask, anything from 60 to 65% of all diseases come from animals. So how much of this would we be able to eliminate if we practice the proper concepts of hygiene, which, by the way, are found in Leviticus? This is what Leviticus is trying to teach. Well, you don't mix this, you don't mix that, and certain things you keep the distance and stuff like that. Because unlike today, right, they didn't have sophisticated medicine. And even today, with our sophisticated medicine, we still find ourselves currently in the middle of this idiotic pandemic, which is completely demolishing the world's economy, and it's just the whole world is, at the moment, is just going belly up because of this idiotic pandemic, right? So even our sophisticated medicine is futile at the moment, right? All because why? Because people just want to eat whatever the hell they want. And as much of it as they don't want to just stuff their faces, and there's no thought whatsoever to these things. So this is basically the statistics of how many animal-borne diseases that exist, in terms of the percentage of all the diseases that we have to worry about. As if we're talking about bacteria and virus and stuff like that, obviously, you know, cancers and stuff don't apply. But certain viruses are known to actually be cause or contribute to the result of cancer in human beings. Right? So that's the first one. That's the first point there, right? So God is not arbitrary, right? You will find nothing arbitrary in Leviticus. We may not understand necessarily why, but there's nothing arbitrary in there, and no less the whole concept of eating meat, whether we should eat meat and stuff like that. And by the way, the meme says, oh, you're going to go to hell for eating meat. There was no concept of hell in the Jewish tradition. All right, so the individual who made up this idiotic thing, and by the way, I don't believe in hell either. Look at my video, What the Hell, and you get my videos for what I believe the whole situation regarding hell. This is not necessarily a sin issue, right? But obviously, if you do not practice temperance, if you do not practice stewardship, then you fail morally, essentially. Right? Because you're supposed to look after your body. Your body is a temple of God and all that sort of thing. God does not give you gifts, the gift of life, the gift of the body, for you to go and squander it in stupidity and being unhealthy, right? That's not what you wouldn't tolerate that of your children if you gave them gifts and they went and squandered and destroyed it, and say, oh, well, I can do whatever I want. Nonsense, right? We all have to answer for what we do with the gifts God gives us, right? And that's what the concept of stewardship is. Right? And our bodies, our health, right? And the environment, how we treat animals, is no less exception, right? It is still applicable today as much as it was in those days. If you don't have to eat it, then don't bloody well eat it. It's that simple. How about a little bit of self-control? No more. You don't see fasting, right? You don't see fasting. You see fasting in the Orthodox, right, which is actually one of the reasons why I've got a lot of respect for the Orthodox Christians, right? You see there's emphasis on fasting and all of these kinds of spiritual disciplines and stuff like that. But in the West, what do you see? Nothing. None of that at all. They're more interested in babbling in tongues and carrying on like a bunch of retards in the church as if they're demonic possessed, but proper spiritual disciplines and spiritual exercises, fasting and so on and so forth, no won't hear of it. Right? Every now and then, and once a year for Lent, they make some pathetic gesture. Oh, I'm going to give up chocolate for Lent, and these pathetic gestures and stuff like that. It's absurd. And then we wonder why we are reaping the consequences, right? Because a lot of people ask, oh, did God send the coronavirus? No, God did not send the coronavirus to punish us or anything like that, right? The coronavirus is merely a direct consequence of our stupidity. It's that simple. God doesn't have to interject into human affairs in order to create the virus to send it as a punishment. God already gave us. He says, listen, if you mess around, I've created the world in such a way. If you mess around, you're going to pay the consequences. You put your hand in the fire, you're going to get burned. It's that simple, right? You screw around with animals. You screw around with unclean animals. You don't practice proper hygiene as God recommended and as to the best of your knowledge, specifically now in terms of the scientific research that we have on this stuff. If you ignore that, what are you're gonna pay the price. You're gonna have pandemics. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And who are the ones that are the most vulnerable? The obese, the ones with compromised immune systems, etc., etc., etc. Most of these things come down to lifestyle. Most of these things come down to lifestyle. So and then you see that with every generation, right, we pass on mutations, errors, and with the destruction of our DNA. And what contributes to that? Bad diet. You can actually identify. So, for example, if you analyze the sperm of a man, right, a man's sperm, you can tell the quality of the man's sperm just by looking at his diet, and the destruction of the eggs that a woman has by looking at her diet. It's that simple. And we pass these diseases, these problems onto our children because of our stupidity. We continue to want to smoke while pregnant and eat garbage while pregnant, etc., etc., etc. It's completely retarded. And then we wonder, wow, why is the human race degenerating? Well, obviously, because we're stupid. Okay? and we don't want to listen because we think we're more clever and we have the right to do whatever we want. Here's a quote, right? This is from Flesh Diet and Aftermath of Sin, right? This is by Ellen White. She's a prophet of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, for the purposes of this video, I could care less what you think of her, but if she says true stuff, then so be it, right? And this was written in 1905. All right, so this is about 120 years old, right? And already then we knew certain principles, right? God gave our first parents the food he designed that the race should eat. It was contrary to his plan to have the life of any creature taken. So much for people that believe in evolution, right? There was to be no death in Eden. The fruit of the trees in the garden was the food man's wants required. God gave man no permission to eat food until after the flood. Everything had been destroyed upon which man could subsist, and therefore the Lord in their necessity gave Noah permission to eat of the clean animals which he had taken. So this was already long before there were any Jews whatsoever. So this idea that the concept of clean and unclean when it comes to meat and diet, that it's a part of the Jewish ceremonial laws, is a lot of garbage. Okay, but animal food was not the most healthful article of food for man. People who lived before the flood ate animal food and gratified their lust until their cup of iniquity was full. And you see the same thing today, intemperance of diet, right? Completely intemperate diet. And God cleansed the earth of its moral pollution by the flood. Then the third dreadful curse rested upon the earth. The first curse was pronounced upon the posterity of Adam upon the earth because of disobedience. The second curse came upon the ground after Cain slew his brother Abel. And the third most dreadful curse from God came upon the earth at the flood. After the flood, people ate largely of animal food. God saw that the ways of man were corrupt, and that he was disposed to exalt himself proudly against his creator and to follow the inclinations of his own heart. And he permitted that long-lived race. So we understand that they used to live a lot longer than we do today, right? That long-lived race to eat animal food to shorten their sinful lives. Soon after the flood, the race began to rapidly decrease in size and in length of years, right? Antediluvian depravity. If you want to read it, I'll put all the things in there. And Seventh-day Adventists have believed this for years, right? Ministry of Healing, also written in around 1905. Right, those who eat flesh are but eating grains and vegetables at second hand. For the animal receives from these things the nutrition that produces growth. The life that was in the grains and the vegetable passes to the eater. We receive it by eating the flesh of the animal. How much better to get it direct? By eating the food that God provided for our use. And so on and so forth. Flesh was never the best food, but its use is now doubly objectionable, right? Since disease in animals is so rapidly increasing. She's already speaking about this already back in the early 1900s, late 1800s. Those who use flesh foods little know what they are eating. Often if they could see the animals when living and know the quality of the meat they eat, they would turn from it with loathing, right? So how many people today complain about the food industry, right? And how bad it is today. And Ellen White was already saying this in 1900, that immoral practices of the food industry were already been, of the meat industry were already being practiced. People are continually eating flesh that is filled with tuberculosis and cancerous germs. Tuberculosis, cancer, and other fatal diseases are thus communicated. Right, and we already know today that certain types of meats and the way we cure them and stuff like that are carcinogens, right, of the first order, of the highest order. The tissue of swine swarmed with parasites. Of the swine God said it is unclean, you shall not eat of nor touch it. And this command was given because swine's flesh is unfit for food. Swines are scavengers, and this is the only use they were intended to serve. Never under any circumstances was their flesh to be eaten by human beings. It is impossible for the flesh of any living creature to be wholesome when filth is its natural element and when it feeds upon every detestable thing. Right? She's not using soft words here. Often animals are taken to the market and sold for food when they are so diseased that their owners fear to keep them longer, and some of the processes of fattening them, right? What do? We do this today. We inject them with steroids, don't we? Of fattening them for market, produce disease, right? We feed them corn and stuff them full of steroids today. And what does this cause? Cancers and all that sort of thing. She was already saying this 120 odd years ago. Shut away from the light, the pure air, breathing the atmosphere of filthy stables, perhaps fattening on decaying food, the entire body soon becomes contaminated with foul matter. Animals are often, and she says, to pity the animals, transported long distances, subjected to great suffering in reaching a market, taken from the green pastures and travelling for weary miles over the hot dusty roads, or crowded into filthy cars, feverish and exhausted, often for many hours deprived of food and water. The poor creatures are driven to their death, that human beings may feast on their carcasses. Right, here's an interesting one. Many places become so contaminated by the filth on which they feed as to be the cause of disease. This is especially the case where the fish come into contact with the sewage of large cities. The fish that are fed on the contents of the drains may pass into distant waters and may be caught where the water is pure and fresh. Thus, when used as food, they bring disease and death on those who do not suspect the danger. What, not Hiroshima, what was that thing in Japan, the nuclear power plant that blew up, right, that went up and spread radioactive contaminants into the oceans for hundreds of miles, right, contaminating everything, and we are now eating them, right? So already knew this, okay? Ellen White already knew this, and this is the principle, and we ignore it, and we suffer the consequences. Essentially, we suffer the consequences, and these things need to be understood. So she talks about, right now, I've got something over here from Johns Hopkins. Now everyone knows Johns Hopkins, the institute, the hospital. They train physicians, one of the most renowned institutions in the world. Right, I've already actually gone through this in another video, but that was a long time, and I'm not particularly happy with that video. So, so very interesting, because this document is actually going to bring up. So Ellen White talks about that animal food basically shortened the lives of human beings. So it became like a corruption to them, so that they would their lives were not as long. They were more diseased, and even their stature decreased, right? So human beings begin to shrink in size and all that kind of thing. Now let's look at this study, right? The Bulletin of the History of Medicine, organ of the American Association of History of Medicine and of the Johns Hopkins Institute of the History of Medicine. Volume, so it's September, October 1953. So this is not that long ago, right? Contents, so on and so forth, and here we go. So here we see, let's bring that a little bit smaller. Here we see, it says here, an experimental pharmacological appreciation of Leviticus and Deuteronomy by David I. Macht. So he says here, right, let's do this. So it's a little bit bigger. While engaged in extensive research, which is still in progress, on the chemical and pharmacological properties of the blood and muscles of normal individuals and of patients afflicted with cancer, the writer became interested in investigating the comparative pharmacological actions of fresh muscle juices and of saline extracts of skeletal muscle tissues of different species of animals, both quadrupeds and birds. Right? Inasmuch as zoological experiments with such extracts cannot be easily performed on the account of protein reactions occurring after injections of such juices into animals and on account of bacterial and fungal contaminations. A new and novel approach to the problem was made by the special phytopharmacological methods employed by the author in the last 30 years. By phytopharmacology, it is meant the study of the action of drugs, poisons, toxins, sera, and various chemicals on living plant physiological test objects, in contrast to animal or zoopharmacological test objects. By this method has been found that the author and his co-workers that many toxic constituents can be detected in the blood and various body fluids of human beings, which toxins cannot be readily demonstrated by animal experience and even by ordinary physico-chemical methods. The simplest method employed for such work by the author is to study the effect on the root growth of seedlings of Lupinus albus, grown in plant physiological solutions containing the necessary salts and ions for their growth, with and without the addition of 1 or more % of the chemical to be investigated. Such seedlings grown under strictly controlled ecological conditions of light, temperature, etc., give very consistent results, statistically reliable. In this way, the author and his school have already discovered the presence of specific toxins in the blood of patients suffering from very fatal disease, emphagus, in patients afflicted with pernicious anemia, and in the blood of all psychotic patients. Such methods are at present employed in the research on the blood of normal and cancerous patients, right? So basically, he takes a solution of a particular thing. He's got these plants that are the seedlings grown in highly controlled, so that their growth rate is predictable, and then he studies any adverse effects on the growth and the longevity and so on, and so the development of the plant, to identify whether there are toxins and things like that. And this is and even, at least in those days, we don't know about today, but a very reliable way of knowing that if this thing kills off the plant, it's going to kill you off, basically, right? And so let's go back, right? So, and here's the study. In studying muscle extracts of fresh meats from various species of animals, some very interesting findings were made. These are exhibited in subjoined tables. To understand the significance of the tables, one must bear in mind that the phytotoxic index means that the ratio in percentages of root growth Lupinus albus seedlings in a solution of unknown muscle juice dissolved in plant physiological saline to growth of seedlings from exactly the same crop of plants grown in normal control solutions at exactly the same conditions. The lower the index, the more poisonous is the effect. An examination of the figures reveals data which are of considerable interest not only to the medical investigator but also to students of ancient biblical literature. It was found that muscle juices and saline extracts of skeletal muscles or meats from such domestic animals as the ox, calf, sheep, goat, these are all clean animals, and deer, commonly employed as food, were practically non-toxic for the root. Right? Before we get to that graph, growth of the did not inhibit. On the other hand, the muscle extracts prepared in the exact same way from the 4 quadrupeds specifically prohibited to be consumed as food in Leviticus, namely the hog, hare, coney, and the camel, were very toxic for the seedlings. So here we go, right? The ox, calf, sheep, right? So index of growth, the higher it is, the least toxic. So basically, uninhibited growth of the seedling, right, would be 100%. The ox 91, calf 82, sheep 94. So lamb is actually the healthiest, the least toxic of all the clean meats, right? Goat 90, deer 90. But if we go swine, immediately drops almost by half, right? Look how toxic that is for the plant. 54%, 49%, 46%, 41%. Look at the horse, and some people want to eat horse meat. 39%. How ridiculously toxic it is. The horse is actually worse than the swine. And some people may wonder, hang on, but doesn't the horse eat grass and chew the cud and stuff? Yes, but the horse does not have split hooves, which means that there is something about its digestive system. First of all, the horse, like the guinea pig, eat their own excreta naturally, right? they re-ingest, so what's called cecal feces. They eat, they reintroduce their own excreta. The camel does not sweat, so it instead of sweating, so sweating often is a way of removing salts and toxins from the body. The camel does not do that in order, in desert conditions, to retain as much water as possible, and therefore the level of toxic chemicals builds up quite a lot in the animal's meat. Right? Very, very interesting. So let's continue. Other experiments were made in exactly the same way. So they also went, so let's go up there. And that just explains, similar with the extra from other quadrupeds. So birds of prey, hog, fox, opossum, hamster, black bear, grizzly bear, and so on and so forth. Right, exact with muscle extracts from various birds. Here again was found that the extracts from the flesh of chicken, the duck, goose, turkey, pigeon, quail were not particularly toxic. Similar from the of birds of prey, for example. So here we go. Just some more animals. Dog, cat. So dog is actually healthier than the pig. Is less toxic than the swine, by the way. Cat's about as toxic as the swine, and then the stupid Westerners want to turn up their nose up at the Chinese, right? Squirrel 43, rat 55, groundhog 53, fox 50, 53, 46, hamster, black bear, and so on and so forth. Grizzly bear 55, rhino, right? And here are the birds. Chicken 83, duck 90, 85, 85, 93. Whereas as soon as you have predators or predators or scavengers, you have 63, hawk 36. How ridiculously toxic is that, right? 63, the owl 62. So even the owl is healthier than the swine, and the sparrowhawk is healthier than the swine. The crow 46. We know a crow, scavenger, as well as carnivore, actual predator, right? The coot 88, right? Wild duck 85, the swan 87. So swan sort of falls into that kind of family, goose and duck and so on and so forth, right? Under that same type of creature, sort of thing. Of special interest with experiment muscle juices, also blood solutions obtained from many species of fish. 54 species of fish were so far studied, and here we go. So immediately, if you see 80, 80, 80, you know that what's the biblical criteria? You can eat fish if they have fins as well as scales, right? So you can tell just from the numbers which ones have fins and scales and which ones do not. There we go, immediately. Catfish. How often is the catfish eaten, especially in the United States and other places, right? 105, the black drum, right? 105. Very, 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 it actually helped the plant grow a little bit, didn't it? Right? 48, 80, 90, 90, 40, right? The eel, right? Eels consumed quite a lot in Asia. Right, 87, so on and so forth. The herring, right? The Scandinavians like their herring. The herring is very good, no problem, and so on and so forth. The pompano, I actually have no idea what that is. The pompano. Porcupine fish 60, toxic, right? And by the way, the value does not reflect the overall toxicity of the animal, because, for example, if I'm not mistaken, the porcupine fish also actually have venom. So, for example, the puffer over here, you have 51, right? But the puffer also has venom sacs that if you don't cut it properly, it'll kill you. It's got nerve toxins and stuff like that, right? Rainbow trout, 81. Rock salmon trout 100, and you get the idea, you get the message, right? So here's a experiment again for these ones. So basically it's talking again, if they have fins and scales, you can eat them. It's you know, they're not the best always, but it's a good indicator, right? You never get lower than 70. Whereas as soon as you go, you immediately go down. Hammerhead, shark, puffer. And here in another experiment, 44, the puffer is actually lower than the previous result that it gave, right? It was 50 something. Let's go puffer. Spheroides maculatus, Let's have a look here. Puffer spheroides maculatus 51. All right. So slightly different, but both very, very low. This one actually lower than the previous one. So you get the message. Here's an interesting thing. A beautiful explanation is found in a historical archive, so on and so forth. Has been found that quails of Near East returning from their migration flying over terrains in which various poisonous plants are growing among the hellebore, Aconitum napellus, and especially abundant the hemlock. The birds gorge themselves on berries which seem to be markedly immune or resistant to the poisonous products. Their flesh, however, becomes very poisonous for higher animals and was shown by actual experiments of Professor Sergeant. Thus, without detracting from the biblical account of retribution, the poisoning can be explained on physical grounds. So basically, we know that when Israel was in the desert, they started to complain about the manna, right? Oh, they're sick and tired of manna, and they were complaining to God, oh, we want the meat that we had in Egypt. And God eventually got fed up and said, right, and sent the quail, right, you can have the quail. And what happened? A whole bunch of them started to drop dead. Why? Because you can actually explain it on physical grounds, that the quail in their migratory patterns have to actually, as they fly over, consume poisonous berries. It doesn't affect the quail, but it gets into the meat, and if you eat it, you die. Right? Even though the quail is technically considered clean. A clean animal, right? So there are a lot more considerations that have to be taken. Just because the animal is clean does not necessarily mean that that particular animal you should be eating, right? From that particular animal from that particular place. Oh, yeah. Right? A little bit stiff today, right? Sitting like this doesn't help. So, very, very interesting. And most Christians just don't understand this, right? Now, let's get into a little bit of other science. So why is this the case, right? We understand we've got something that is known as trophic levels, right? Trophic levels, I believe is the term, right? So basically, you start from your trophic levels. You start from bottom up. So at the bottom, you basically have your herbivores, right? Whoops. You have your herbivores, right? And then all the way at the top, you usually have your predators. And then your trophic level is basically, so let's say you have, this animal, so you right at the bottom, you've got plants, right? So basically, so this animal, right? So let's say you've got trophic level 1, and so then this animal eats plants, so that's trophic level 2, right? That animal then eats trophic level 3, and so the animal until the predators, which are right at the top, right? Let's say, so that's trophic level 3, so yes, 4, and then this is trophic level 5. No one, and most people, they don't have predators. This is technically incorrect, because when these animals die, many animals at the bottom then feed on their carcasses. Okay, it's the circle of life. All right, and then down here, what do you have? Right, you have your scavengers, right? So your scavengers, so let's say you've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So your scavengers basically will feed from every single trophic level, right? Every single trophic level, all the way up to the predators right at the top. Okay, now why am I even bringing this up? Because we've got there's a concept known as biomagnification. Right, okay, I ran out of space, forgive me, right? Actually, you know what, let me write that properly. So you've got bio. I'm just going to write biomag, right? Biomagnification. What does this mean? It means if there are any toxins at the lowest at the lowest trophic level. So you've got your plants, right? You've got your plants, okay? You've got your plants, and maybe you've got a pond, you've got your water pond, and so on and so forth, right? If there are any contaminants at this point, right, it's usually at a relatively low concentration. So let's say you've got one in this level, you've got let's say 1 ppm, part per million, of a particular toxin. Right, let me put this lower. So right at the bottom, ppm, you've got 1 part per million, right? At the next trophic level, those toxins will be at, let's say, 10 ppm. At the next one, it'll be at 100 ppm. So biomagnification basically means that whatever toxins occur, whatever toxins or poisons or problems occur in the environment, will be magnified exponentially the higher up the trophic levels that you go, right? So over there, there'll be 1,000 parts per million, then say 10,000, or up to whatever, right? Now, this is not, this is just to give you the idea. This is not exactly accurate. This can vary depending on the animals, how the animal, or how successful is the animal at excreting, and so on and so forth, because the biological processes of different animals vary very substantially, right? And then because your scavengers, right, your prawns, your crabs, mussels, all these kinds of things, the filter feeders and all that kind of stuff, they not only feed off every single trophic level, right, but they also feed on excreta, right? Well, basically it's, poo, right? Decaying flesh, but also excreta. And excreta, basically, why do you urinate and why do you defecate? That is highly concentrated waste material, and prawns and crabs and things like that eat on that. And so your scavengers, right, your scavengers and your cleaners, right, and your cleaners will be significantly higher in toxins even than the animals that occur at the highest trophic level, because not only do they feed on every single one of the levels, right, and may even eat plant material as well, but because they are scavengers and cleaners, it means that they also filter all the excreta. Not only do they feed on these animals when they die, right, and again, because the animals die, right, when they die, sometimes the cause is a disease, so they will eat diseased meat. Okay, they're eating diseased meat, right, which is one of the reasons why the animals die. And the Bible says, don't touch an animal if it dies, or if it dies of, unless you slaughtered the thing, don't eat it, right? Don't think, that's convenient, right? And you actually have idiots in the world, right? Stupid morons that go out and pick up roadkill and make food out of them. Till this day, right? Today, it's happening somewhere in the world, some moron, okay? And so these guys, the concentration of toxins is so ridiculously high. It'll be absolutely unbelievable, right? And ladies and gentlemen, this remains true till this day. This is not just for the Jews. This is still true today, right? Still true today, and it is further aggravated, right, by the fact that our practices of food production are corrupt, are utterly corrupt. Now, here's a story. A lot of people like to talk about Daniel, but this is something I've never heard them say. So we have Daniel. No, not Daniel. David. No, Daniel. Yeah, Daniel. Daniel, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? He was taken captive, right, by the king of Babylon, right? And he says to the king of Babylon, listen, you've provided me with food, but you've provided me with food from the king's table, right? But I don't want to eat that food. I want water and I want vegetables. right? And the Bible testifies to the fact that Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel were healthier and better than anyone else, right? Right at the beginning, right? Right at the beginning. I will not eat from the king's table. Ladies and gentlemen, think about it. Are you eating from the king's table today? So let's think about this. Let's think about this, right? Christians today. Christians today, whether we like it or not, have been taken captive by the world powers, right? Whether you, I don't care whether you think the US is a Christian nation or this and this. The fact of the matter, the world is evil and corrupt and is run by corrupt people. Who are the new kings of Babylon? At the moment, it would be your food industry. Right? I'm speaking typologically, right? Remember this word, right? Typology. Typology. Typology is fantastic, right? Because there's always a lesson to be drawn, right? Is the food industry, the oligarchs, right? The oligarchy, right? The rich men who run the world, who lobby government, right? These guys lobby government to get favors. They give money, right? And here's some money, and you're going to tell everyone that milk is absolutely essential for your health. You're going to tell everyone that that the stuff we produce you cannot live without. So you've got big meat, big dairy, etc., etc. All of these massive corporations, all these massive interests in certain things. You had the same thing with cigarettes, right? Let's lobby the government to tell everyone that cigarettes are great. They're actually good for you. They're not, you know. And eventually that all came out in the wash. And finally, people are today beginning to cotton on to this, right? So these are our new kings, the oligarchs. These are the people that rule us now. These are the people that rule us now, and these are people that build food empires. Right? Food empires. Heard of McDonald's? Heard of Burger King? Right? Burger King, food empire. He's the Burger King. Nebuchadnezzar was the Burger King. Right? What do we need to say, ladies and gentlemen? We need to say, I am not going to eat from the king's table. So it's that simple. Right? It's that simple. Now here's another interesting fact. Okay? The Bible says, blood. If you're going to eat meat, right, and fat, right, it said to Israel, stay away from blood and fat. Okay? Why? Why stay away from blood and fat? Okay? Well, ladies and gentlemen, think about it logically. The blood. What carries the toxins in your body from your cells to wherever it needs to go to be excreted? Your blood. Right? If you have poisoned, if you're poisoned, if you have a disease, if you have anything wrong with you, what do they test? They test your blood, because the toxins are going to be found in your blood. They're going to test your blood. So when God says, don't eat the blood, do you think he knows what he's talking about? It's like, listen, because if there's any toxins or whatever the case might be, right, the blood transports hormones, transports everything in the animal, from the toxins to the hormones and all that kind of stuff, right? We want to complain about the meat industry pumping hormones into the animals, right? But the blood transports the animal hormones. We should stay away from the blood. Drain it out properly, first of all. So is God being arbitrary? Really? No, God is not being arbitrary. So the blood is the transportation system for all of the animals, for all of the animals' biological process, including the waste and stuff like that. And that's where we're going to find if there's heavy metal poisoning, if there's anything, if there's any toxins and stuff, we're going to find it in the body, metabolites and free radicals and whatever the case might be, right? Now, why the fat? Is it just because it makes you fat? Oh, my figure, you know. Right? Is that why you should stay away from fat? Ladies and gentlemen, here's something you need to understand. If your body takes in toxins, right, but is unable to eliminate them, where can it allow those toxins to continue circulating in the blood, destroying things? It cannot. So what does it do? It neutralizes the toxins by storing it, by encapsulating them and storing them in fat. This is why when you start to lose weight and you go on a diet, you usually get sick. Because when you start going on a diet and your body starts breaking down the fat and that energy passes into your blood, all of the rubbish that is stored in all of the toxins that are stored in the fat go back into your blood system and make you sick. So you can get really, really violent from weight. That's why you should never do any weight loss program that makes you lose weight too quickly, right? Because it actually can kill you, technically speaking. Not many people do, but technically it can actually kill you depending on what you've got stored in your fat, right? But many people experience when they go through what? Detox. That's what we call detox, right? It's what we call detox. You can get sick for like up to 2 weeks. You feel like you've got the flu or something ridiculous. That's simple, all right? I mean, why do Christians not know this? All right? I mean, imagine we use this as a means of evangelism, right? Now listen, let's be very, very clear. Let's be very, very clear, okay? Right. Veganism. Right. This is a lot of rubbish, okay? It's a lot of rubbish, morons. The vegan activist movement, a bunch of morons, idiots. That is not for Christians. That is political, right? It's politically motivated, right? It is half insane, right? They are vandals. They go and these people basically just in general bring complete and utter disrepute to any effort to try and get people healthy because of these fanatic morons that run around making a nuisance of themselves. For the Christian, our principle is stewardship. Stewardship over the body, stewardship over the environment, stewardship over animals. Because one of the problems, so for example, stewardship over animals, right? It is true that animals suffer. Animals suffer, they can feel things, they can... Yes, absolutely true. Absolutely true. The problem, and this is one of the reasons why I reject the vegan movement, is because the vegan movement, right, this whole concept here, this fact, this truth, right, is being used, right, to how can you say, is being used to elevate animals to the level and the dignity of human beings. And that's the problem, right? So the vegan movement is actually using this fact to downgrade the status of humans, right? To downgrade the status of humans so that humans become subject, to nature, right? God said, have dominion, have stewardship. We were not designed to become subject to nature. This nature, this is this process, right, which veganism is getting involved in, is globalism. All right, because this is how the corporations, the oligarchs, just the whole new world order stuff, this is a means by which they are making moves to control all the natural resources in the world and so on and so forth, and basically establish a tyranny over mankind, essentially, right? The globalist technocracy and stuff like that. And the vegan agenda is part of that. And the reason why they're using the vegan agenda is because they always use something positive in which to hide poison. Okay, but this inverts, right? So in the Bible, man is the steward, right, and has dominion, right? But, and this is in the Bible, this is God's order. However, in the political secular world order, man is subject. Man is subject to nature. It's an inversion of the divine principles, right? Man becomes a subject of nature, and you essentially then have elements of basically nature worship, where even rivers and mountains and natural features are being given the status of persons, the legal status of persons, so that a mountain has the same legal right as a human being does. Complete inversion of what God intended. Okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, that is that. And I really wish Christians would get some sense into their brains, because this is ridiculous. I mean, I was fat, and I mean 2 years ago, right? Let me tell you my story. 2 years ago, I was weighing 100 kilos, right? If not more. I was a size 36 waist, and I'm only 5'7" or 5'7". I'm 5'8". I'm either 5'8" or 5'9". I can never remember. Right? I work in meters. I'm 1.83 meters. You guys can convert that for me. So I think it's 5'8", somewhere around there. Anyway, I hate imperial. Why does imperial even exist? Down with the imperialism. Anyway, and I was weighing 100 kilos, and I was a size 36 waist 2 years ago. Originally, I was a size 32, right? Waist. And what happens is I moved over to the UK, and because I wanted a better life and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to find a job, because in South Africa, the political situation there is idiotic, just like, political stupidity didn't cease once apartheid ended, right? They just traded one political imbecility for another. Okay, I came to the UK, found good work, eventually built my way up, And as is expected, once a person becomes a little bit more affluent, so basically in South Africa, poverty kept me healthy. Right? Poverty kept me healthy. But once I came to the UK, and in the UK, junk food is so cheap, right? You can buy like Coca-Cola, a 24 pack of Coca-Cola for like just a few quid, like for nothing compared to what you earn, right? For nothing. I could go back in the day, I could go through a pack of 24 Coca-Colas, myself and my wife together, in one weekend. Right? And I had always been a big eater, but now I was eating a lot of rubbish, and also and there were various issues as well. I mean, I was you know, I've got sort of like certain, how can I say, personality disorder issues and stuff like that, and ADD, and so you kind of eat in a nervous, not in a nervous way, but I eventually realized that part of my love for food was actually more of a psychological thing, having gone hungry and stuff like that, than it was in anything else. And also, yeah, so there was a lot of problems with that and stuff. But nevertheless, you know, I caught myself out. I'm like, what am I doing? And now here's the interesting thing. I'd never suffered from seasonal allergies in my entire life, ever. But let me tell you, within a year of being in this country, I was experiencing seasonal allergies to the point of debilitation, right? So that I had to eventually go to the doctor and get prescription medication for allergies, and I was basically given the strongest stuff for allergies that existed, right? Never before in my life had I ever experienced allergies of any sort, seasonal allergies and all that kind of stuff. So basically from the beginning of spring to the end of summer was hell. Okay, so 2 years ago I said, right, I sold my car and I bought a mountain bike, and I started cycling to work every day, changed my diet, right? Completely changed my diet. I mean, I still eat, you know, pleasurable things here and there, right? I still enjoy a hamburger on occasion. I haven't been able to fully cut out meat yet. Okay, I'm hoping to. But at the moment, basically, my wife and I, we only eat lamb on occasion, and sometimes beef, right? And but for the vast majority of our food is vegetarian and or vegan. Okay, and I'm not saying this as like some badge of honor, right? I'm just telling you my experience. Okay, and so I dropped not so much weight, but dropped in size. So I'm a 32 again, basically, and dropped in size, and I think because of the cycling, I've built quite a lot of muscle in my legs and stuff like that. So muscle weighing more than fat, I think, sort of. So I'm now, but I did drop a lot of kilos. I'm sort of like 80 something. I'm about 88 kilos now, sort of thing. So I went from 100 to about 88, around there, kilos, between sort of 87, 88, 89. I fluctuate there, sort of thing. And I cycle every single day to work and back, right? I go along the canal all the way, come hell or high water. If it's raining, if it's snow, I sold the car, right? So there's no temptation. Now there's no waste of money on stupid cars as well. They're basically they're nice, but they're a black hole for money. I had a BMW coupe, a 2008 model. Really sexy cars, those things. Nice 19-inch rims, and it was really cool. But got rid of it. Waste of money. That was pride and ego talking there. You know, I had to humble myself a lot, because I have a problem with that as well. And let me tell you the difference. I now no longer have allergies for the second year running. I suddenly noticed last year, right, which was the first year I was doing, which was about a year and a half, something like that. So about roughly a year into my thing. I'm now going on my third year now doing this. where I suddenly noticed I didn't need the allergy tablets anymore. My allergies were gone. So I went from debilitating. So I actually had to take days of sick leave off because my eyes were watering, and because I operate heavy machinery and stuff like that, because I'm an engineer, for those of you that don't know. I operate machinery and stuff like that. If you can't see through the blurry eyes and stuff, it's dangerous, sort of thing. I had to take sick days, sick leave and stuff like that. Ridiculous. And all of a sudden I was getting sick. Never before did I really ever get sick. Now I'm suddenly getting sick. I actually at one point had so many days leave that the director of the company actually came to have a word with me. It's like, what's going on? Why you got so much sick leave? What are you doing? And that was one of the things that got a wake up call. I said, I need to reverse this, because I used to be so active and stuff like that. That's one of the problems in the UK, being active. It's like everything is stupid expensive. To martial arts class or whatever, everything is expensive. That kind of stuff is really expensive in this country. Quite ridiculous, right? Climbing gyms and stuff like that. It's stupid. Costs next to nothing in South Africa, but in this country, bloody hell. And the amount of safety ridiculousness that you got to put up with, health and safety stuff, it almost just makes it unpleasant after a while. But yeah, you've got to try and make things moron-proof. But anyway, totally reversed everything. Totally reversed all of it. And I'm lucky because I did it early in time. Right? Even many of my wife's health problems, gone. So, that's something to think about, ladies and gentlemen. God is not arbitrary, right? Take the Bible seriously, okay? Take the Bible seriously. It was not the reason why God didn't choose clean animals, even in the sacrificial system, right? We just saw from the study that the lamb, of all the clean animals, the lamb is the cleanest, the sheep is the cleanest. It's got the least toxins in it. That's one of the reasons why God chose the lamb. It's not arbitrary, these things. That's why he chose the lamb as a symbol of Christ for sacrifice. And only clean animals were allowed to be sacrificed, because the sacrifice represents the purity of Christ without sin. So the animals with the least toxicity. Come on, right? It's not just an arbitrary symbol. There's concrete, real world reasons for these things, right? The dove, and so on and so forth. The pigeon. These were all considered clean and were allowed to be used for sacrifice because it represented Christ, right? The lamb without blemish, and so on and so forth. There are reasons for these things, right? It's not arbitrary. It's not arbitrary stuff that God thumb sucked. Oh, I'm going to do it like that for no reason whatsoever. All right? It's ridiculous. When are we going to stop treating God like that? It's totally stupid. And it's like, because we don't understand, then we give an answer. Well, it's because God has the prerogative to be arbitrary. Yeah, he may have the prerogative, but no, he would not actually, because we're not just dealing with a proposition. We're dealing with a person who either would or would not be a certain way. God has a character. He has a personality. And if you know anything about God, if you have a relationship with God and you're not purely interested in making arguments for the sake of arguments, right? Just for the sake of philosophy and stuff like that, you'd realize that, right? And then as soon as someone came in, you would be like, hang on, I know my God, and I know him to not be arbitrary, ever. Even if I can't understand the reason, there's a reason, we just can't see it. So, how about a bit more faith and maybe some research, because this information is out there, Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your viewership. Cheerio.